Good morning, everybody. If we'll be turning our Bibles to the book of Deuteronomy this morning, chapter 7, and we'll slightly repeat a few verses we were able to cover last week at the end of the lesson in chapter 7. And hopefully, I would like to speed this up and be a lot of reading today, because a lot of this is repetition to you guys. Stuff we've already read and studied in the previous books leading up to Deuteronomy. And this book of the Bible, Deuteronomy, these are the words that Moses spoke to the children of Israel. And these are the words that he's speaking to them as they're preparing to cross into the promised land, or Canaan land, land of milk and honey, which whenever you prefer to call it. It's got several names. And the thing about it, it's going to be a better place for them to go, and a much better place from the one they just left, which was Egypt. But before they can get in there and take God's promise of what it's going to be, there's a problem in that land. It's called the Canaanites. And Moses is hereby giving them, the children of Israel, a warning about these Canaanites who are in this land, as we're going to read here in the next chapters. And what would happen if they were to commingle with those Canaanites when they moved into that land. They're going to see, Moses lets them know what would be the outcome, and it's not a good outcome. So with that being said, God gives them instructions that those peoples will have to be removed to the biggest extent in order for them to be well off in that new land. And that's what we've been reading and studying. This book of chapter 7, we read last week first few verses, and we pretty much realized that the Canaanites, they had a lot of really horrible practices in that land. They were a really bad people. I'm not going to repeat all of those. I'm just going to start reading here in chapter 7, and I'd like to move all the way through chapter 10 this morning, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to start chapter 7, verse 1. I'm going to repeat somewhat, reread somewhat we read last week, and then we'll keep going on through there. All right. Chapter 7, verse 1. When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land, this is Moses telling these Israelites, the children of Israel, whither thou goest to possess it, and hast cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And we're going to read in these verses here coming up that God's going to remind these people they're going to be successful in this land, not because of they were a mighty nation as they come out of Egypt. It's all God. God's the one that done everything. And that's what we're going to read in the verses coming up. Verse 2, and when the Lord thy God shall deliver them, that's God delivering them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. So you see there, they're not to show any mercy, and they don't need to be making any covenants with these people. That's a compromise. If that's going to be a compromise, because God has done told them that they're not to make any covenant with these people as they move forward. All right, verse 3, neither shalt thou make marriages with them. We can go all the way back into other chapters of the Bible. These marriages, in other scripture there, Isaac was to have a certain bride. He was not to marry him with the people of that land even back then. It's always been that they marry within their own people. They're not these Canaanites. And, it even here again, it's repeated. Don't marry these people of this land. With them, thy daughter shall not give unto thy son, or his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. Verse 4, for they will turn away thy son from following me. There's the reason why. These people has got their own pagan worship systems. They've got their own things that they've cooked up in their minds and their heads. And a lot of it is really bad. It's terrible. It's not a nice place to live. And And so if they compromise and marry within those people, it's going to be just like we'll read when we get over to the book of Kings and Solomon. He gets all these different wives from these different beliefs and stuff, and it changes Solomon. It corrupts Solomon to the point the kingdom is thereby shortly after divided. That's going to be, it's the downfall of the nation. And this warning goes even all the way back to now. They ain't even got into the promised land yet, and God is telling them that not to intermarry with these people because they will turn away thy son from following God, that they may serve other gods. Not only are they going to turn away from God and reject God, they're going to accept some kind of pagan god. They will fall into that trap. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. The punishment for them following these other gods, once they get into Canaan land, if that's what it is, they're going to be destroyed. This is a repeated word from God that's going to happen to these people if they don't do what he tells them. Verse 5, but thus shall ye deal with them. Ye shall destroy their altars, break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. These places were a lot of times on hilltops, they were false places of worship. And, God is telling them to destroy them, to completely remove them. Why would you want to leave stuff like that in your neighborhood? It's pretty much what God is relaying to them. Because if they see this stuff on a daily basis and they leave it, they're going to be subject to succumb to it, and they're going to give in. So they need to wipe it off the face of the earth. It don't need to be visible. It don't need to be present amongst them. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God, and the Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the earth. This goes all the way back to Abraham. Abraham and the nation, he was one man. He had a small family. He left Ur. God chose him. And this people has become what it is because God chose them. It's not because they were a great number or anything that they done. God solely picked these people for his own because God was satisfied. The Lord did not set his love upon you nor choose you because you were more numbered. Right there, just because there's a great nation, more than any people, for you were the fewest of all people. Verse 8, but because the Lord loved you and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand out of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen from the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord thy God, he is God and faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repayeth them that hate him to their face to destroy them. He will not be slack to him that hateth him. He will repay him to his face. Thou shalt therefore keep the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which I command thee this day to do them. Wherefore it shall come to pass, if ye hearken to these judgments and keep and do them, that the Lord thy God shall keep unto thee the covenant and the mercy which he sware unto thy fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are the forefathers. And he will love thee and bless thee and multiply thee. He will also bless the fruit of thy womb. They're going to have plenty of children. They're going to be fruitful. And the fruit of the land, thy corn, thy wine, thine oil, the increase of the kine, cattle, and the flocks of the sheep, and the lamb which he sware unto the fathers. Everything is going to be bountiful if they follow these statutes and these commandments and they live a life like God has instructed them to live. Thou shalt be blessed above all people. There shall not be male or female barren among you or among your cattle. And that takes me back to Jacob. Remember how Laban had him in servitude and how Jacob, all the cattle, the ones that he was separating for himself, and he ended up with just an abundance of cattle. God looks after his people. It's got faith in him. And the Lord will take away from thee all sickness, and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt which thou knowest upon thee, but will lay them upon all them that hate thee. Evidently in Egypt they had some diseases pretty prevalent down there. Down here in the bottom of my study Bible, it's like smallpox, elephantitis, dysentery, ophthalmia. That's a disease of the eye. Evidently God's saying he's going to protect them from all these things if they live a life the way he's laid it out for them right here. They're not going to be they're not going to succumb to the diseases, the things of this world like the people down in Egypt does. If thou shalt say in thine heart, these nations are more than I, how can I dispossess them? Wait a minute, I need to go back to 16. And thou shalt consume all the people which the Lord thy God shall deliver thee. They'll be victorious. Thine eye shall have no pity upon them. God is telling what he's to do to the Canaanites. Neither shalt thou serve thy gods, for thou wilt be a snare unto thee. A snare is a trap. Once trapped and once tangled up in that trap, there's no getting away. That's what that snare. Once they become entangled with them, with the worship of the Canaanites, they're not getting away from it. And, I don't know why the people are like that. I don't know why they was like that back then. Like I've said many times, it seems strange and foreign to me how anybody could worship the way those people did in Canaan and the way they did it. It just seems so foreign to me that have idols and worshiping things made by hands. And not to mention the fact that the way they done some stuff is just absolutely sickening and abhorrent to me. And God goes on to say it was abhorrent to him as well, the things they did. But verse 17, if thou shalt say in thine heart, these nations are more than I, how can I dispossess them? See, God's warned them, don't do like they did at Kadesh Barnea and give up the fight before the battle ever starts because you think they're greater and stronger than thou. Thou shalt not be afraid of them, but shalt well remember what the Lord thy God did unto Pharaoh and unto all Egypt. A lot of the people standing here at this new generation that's hearing these words Moses is repeating to them was not down in Egypt. We know this is the second generation. A lot of those have passed on. It was down there. But Moses is reminding them how they got here. And they don't need to forget, how you got here was a miracle. And he's reminding them that. And the great temptations which thine eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders, and the mighty hand and the stretched out arm, whereby the Lord thy God brought thee out, so shall the Lord thy God do unto all the people of whom thou art afraid. The things that God has done in the past, the miracles he's done that they saw and it was repeated to them, it can and is going to happen again. Moreover, the Lord thy God will send the hornet. That's just the divine power. That's the power of God. It's just a way of saying if something fast and coming in and going to overtake these nations and defeat them. This hornet, it's a divine power. It's the power of God among them until that they are left and hide themselves from thee, be destroyed. They're going to be defeated. 21, thou shalt not be affrighted at them, for the Lord thy God is among you, a mighty God and terrible. And the Lord thy God will put out those nations before thee by little and little. Thou mayest not consume them at once, lest the beasts of the field increase upon thee. That's just the way that Moses is telling them. It's going to be a little by little as they go into this Canaan land, that the dead bodies ain't going to pile up to the point as God defeats these Canaanites. And before, there's so many of them, it's going to be little by little, and so the wild beasts don't multiply in number and overtake the land. So it's a way of God's helping look after them. But the Lord thy God shall deliver them unto thee, and shall destroy them with a mighty destruction until they be destroyed. And he shall deliver their kings into thine hand, and thou shalt destroy their name from under heaven. There shall no man be able to stand before thee until thou have destroyed them. The graven images, these things they've created to worship these false gods, of their gods shall ye burn with fire. Thou shalt not desire the silver or the gold that is on them. Nothing. Don't take none of this corrupt stuff that these people have created to worship their fake gods. In no way take it into your home. Don't hide it away for future. You don't want it. Do not take it. Nor take it unto thee, lest thou be snared therein. For it is an abomination to the Lord thy God. The God don't want them to take none of this stuff. It's an abomination, man. It's a snare to them. So we know what that is. It's going to be a snare. They can't get away from it, and it's going to corrupt them. Verse 26, neither shalt thou bring an abomination into thine house, lest thou be a cursed thing like it, but thou shalt utterly detest it, and thou shalt utterly abhor it, for it is a cursed thing. And we'll read as we go forward. I think we get over in book of Joshua, there's going to be one of the children of Israel, after a battle, he's going to take some of that stuff and put it and hide it under his tent, and we'll see what happens there. but it's a real and true warning. And when we get over to the book of Joshua, his name's Achan, is one of the Israelites who does this, takes some of this stuff, and of course he receives the punishment for it. But think about a man that tempted of that stuff, knowing he's been warned over and over and over, and seen the things, and still succumb to that. It's hard. It's hard for these people to overcome that sometimes. And it's not an easy task, but that's why it's so important that Moses repeats these things over. And that's, as you see here, you're like, we've read this, we've heard this repeated warning over and over. It's because man needs to hear it. He needs to be reminded. God tells him to tuck it in his heart, but man, he's got to be repeated. But that's just the condition. All right. We got verse 26. All right, we finished up chapter 7. Now we're going to move on to chapter 8. More warnings. They need to obey. All right, I'm going to jump right in here. All right, the command to remember God's past dealings. That's the title of this little chapter. All right, verse 1. All the commandments which I command thee this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. Follow the commandments. They're going to receive the promise that God has told them. Verse 2, and thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness to humble thee. See, there's a good reason why they've been wandering in this. We know they're a stiff-necked people. We hear that repeatedly in here. And what better way of wandering in the wilderness for 40 years and doing with God providing the food that you get and the water at different times? They have been humbled. God has humbled these stiff-necked people by this wandering for 40 years. All right? In the wilderness to humble thee and to prove thee. That's it, prove them, to make them see if they're ready, to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or no. So, here we are at the critical time here on this side, on the east side of the Jordan River, just like it was at Kadesh Barnea. God's about to find out what's in their heart and if they've been proved or not when to march over that river and go into that land and defeat the Canaanites. And he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger. There we go, hunger. But he provided them food. God alone provided them food. They didn't do none of this on their own. And fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee known the man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. Everything they are living because God has spoken and willed it. Thy raiment waxed not old upon thee, neither did thy foot swell these 40 years. That's a miracle too. Think about that. The Bible says here that their clothes and their shoes didn't wear out in this 40 years. That's a miracle. And let me see. I didn't make any more notes on it. But other than the fact, it's not hard for me to believe. We're going to read in here. That's a pretty easy miracle, I think, for God to do. If he looked after their shoes and their clothes for the 40 years and they didn't wear out, hey, I believe the Red Sea parted and they crossed it. It ain't too far to believe that God looked after their clothes. So, it's not hard for me to believe that. And, thou shalt also consider in thine heart that as a man chasteneth his son, so the Lord God chasteneth thee. That chasten is hard for me to say, but I know what it means. When a man's son does something wrong, if he just keeps letting him do it, what has he done? He ain't done his job as a dad. He sure don't love his son to the point he lets him keep doing something to destruction. And that's what God is doing with these people here. They have to be chastened, or they would keep making the same old mistakes until their own destruction. So that's a God of love there at chasteneth these people. He loves them. He don't want them to keep making the same old mistakes till they're destroyed and no more. All right. Okay, let's see here. Thou shalt keep thy commandments of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways and to fear him. And that's not just to be scared and frightened, scared to death. That is a fear of respect for God. There's a difference there in just being terrified of, you got to fear and respect to God for what he's telling them. Therefore, Thou shalt keep thy commandments of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For the Lord thy God bringeth thee into a good land. Yeah, it's got some problems here to start with, but God has picked a place for these people to be, and it's a good land. A land of brooks of water, of fountains and depths that spring out of the valleys and hills. These people that's in here have been successful. There's no doubt about it. 40 years ago when they went from Kadesh Barnea, they even said the land was fruitful and had plenty. And these people in their all sick pagan ways, they had it made here. I mean, they had a bountiful land, but that didn't have a good effect on these people. Whatever's wrong with these Canaanites, other than the fact they just don't believe in the one true God, there's big problems here. But just having all that they need, having a good land, having all that food that they could want and a great place to live is not enough for their mind to get away from following these false gods and graven images. For the Lord thy God bringeth thee into good brooks, verse 8, in the land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, and a land of olive oil and honey, a land wherein thou shalt eat bread without scarceness. Thou shalt not lack anything in it, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills thou mayest dig brass. Plenty of natural resources for these people to live and succeed's even mentioned here. It's mentioned in a lot of things that people think makes up a great nation in a land today and definition of it. Here it is in God's words many years ago that Moses is telling them this land is a good land, a successful land, a good place to live. When thou hast eaten and art full, then thou shalt bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he hath given thee. Thank God. They're to thank God for this land. Beware that thou forget not. Now, a lot of times people receive it from God, a great gift from God, and, being in this world, and it's easy to forget what God has done, forget that, but, hopefully it's not gone all the time. But Moses is reminding these people, once you get in this good land and God gets all these enemies away, don't forget that God put you here. God is the one that gave you this place. Do not forget. Because what's going to happen if they forget that God got them there? They're liable to succumb into these false worship practices, not worshiping God, not thanking God on it, and all that just leads to a gradual decline for the people as they move forward. Lest when thou hast eaten and art full, hast built goodly houses and dwelt therein, and when thy herds and thy flocks multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all thou hast is multiplied. They need a warning here from this, because that's once things get easy and plentiful, and it ain't hard times no more, that's when these people are probably going to tend to forget. I think anybody can relate with that today in the way we live now. It's easy to forget. Everything's going good, and the power's and the lights on, the heat's on, got plenty of food, and got plenty of money and things, and it's easy to forget God. And that's what he's warning these people about right here. All right? And then thine heart be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord God which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. They're not to forget that they were servants to the Egyptians in this land, slaves to them. Verse 15, who led thee through that great and terrible wilderness, wherein were fiery serpents, remember that story, and scorpions and drought where there was no water, who brought thee forth water out of the rock of flint. God provided food and he provided water. Who fed thee in the wilderness with manna which thy fathers knew not, that he might humble thee and that he might prove thee to do thee good at thy latter end. This time in the wilderness, this new generation that came up in this wilderness, it was to prove them and to humble them. We just read a few verses ago. And sometimes that's what these people were going to need, because they had a whole different mind thought of coming out of that land of Egypt. They kept wanting to, if you remember that first generation, they were so used to things being provided for them, they just kept wanting to go back to the trough to Egypt. They kept wanting the food from Egypt and the shelter from Egypt. And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hands hath gotten me this wealth. Oh, Lord, there we go. Lord, that's when they'll mess up, is when they start thinking they done all this on their own and God didn't do none of it for them. And that's what Moses is warning them there, that they'll think that they done this, that they got to this point, that God didn't do this for them. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he sware unto thy fathers, as it is this day. God made this covenant with Abraham way back and continues to honor it. It's nothing that they do. It's nothing that they do. They did not make this covenant. And it shall be, if thou do it all, forget the Lord thy God, and walk after other gods, and serve them and worship them, I testify against you this day that ye shall surely perish. If they forget, and if they get to thinking they done all this on their own, what is going to be the result? They are going to perish, is what God tells them. They're not going to succeed. Verse 20, as the nations which the Lord destroyeth before your face, so shall ye perish, because ye would not be obedient unto the voice of the Lord your God. God is going to destroy these enemies. It's not going to be something that they do on their terms and their ideas and their ways. You can remember even when they had not gotten past Sinai very long, and they disobeyed, and Moses said he wasn't going to be with them as they went up to fight. I think it was the Amorites. I get my ites mixed up. But anyway, they thought they could go up there and take on these people in this first group when they had left Egypt, and they went up there without Moses and without God behind them. They were just going to do it, trying to get back on God's good side, and guess what? They were defeated. That's what would have happened here in Canaan land if God hadn't have been with them. All right, chapter 9. I got a few more minutes. See if I got my notes. Hear, O Israel. So he's still talking to the children of Israel. Another warning. Oh yeah, here we go. Thinking about warning, this come across my mind here. Here Moses telling, hear, O Israel, thou art to pass over Jordan this day, to go in to possess nations greater and mightier than thyself, cities great and fenced up to heaven. You know, these people got these defense fortified cities up, but that's not going to hold back God. It's not going to hold back the children of Israel as they go through into here. We're going to see that the walls of Jericho fall, and there's going to be other cities destroyed as we move forward. And within these tall and fenced up cities, verse 2, a people great and tall, the children of the Anakims, whom thou knowest, of whom thou hast heard say, who can stand before the children of Anak? Verse 3, understand therefore this day that the Lord thy God is he which goeth over before thee as a consuming fire. He shall destroy them, and he shall bring them down before thy face. So shalt thou drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord hath said unto thee. Verse 4, speak not thou in thine heart after the Lord thy God has cast them out from before thee, saying, for my righteousness the Lord hath brought me in to possess this land, but for the wickedness of the nations the Lord doth drive them out from before thee. All right, not because the children of Israel are righteous, not because they are godlike and attained a level to where they're like God. God is right here. It's plainly right here. This end of this verse, nations the Lord drive them out from before thee is for the wickedness of these nations. This is repeated again if we started in chapter 7. You know, that was a wicked land. And why it got to that point, other parts of the world were wicked at that time to some degree. Egypt was wicked. But this place was bad. And it was a nice land. We know that because all the things that could make a nation successful and plentiful and bountiful and have plenty of children and all there, according to what they've seen when they left out from Kadesh Barnea, and God has promised them there's cities here. But all those good things, but these people in this thing was wicked. They were wicked, and it's not going to be because of the righteousness of the Israelites that they are going to be pushed out of this land, defeated and destroyed, it's because of God wants them out of there because of their wickedness. Verse 5, yeah. Not for thy righteousness or for the uprightness of thine heart dost thou go to possess their land, but for the wickedness of these nations the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee, and that he may perform the word which the Lord sware unto thy fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand therefore that the Lord thy God giveth thee not this good land to possess it for thy righteousness, for thou art a stiff-necked people. All right. And they are a stiff-necked people. And that's why this message, I believe Moses is repeating over and over. They have this tendency to be stiff-necked and stubborn in all that they do, but God still loves them. And he's provided for them all these years after leaving Egypt. And, you know, if nobody can say our God is not a long-suffering and loving God to love these people and provided food and water for them for all these years and give them this land for their taking if they just follow his words. And then, you know, this here is a warning for these people as they go into Canaan. I'm about to wrap it up. And it's repeated over and over is what I'm trying to say. And I could see, imagine this come to my thoughts. If you had a friend from somewhere, had never been to America, didn't know nothing about America, would you invite them over and not give them any warnings about some of the stuff to look out for when they got here? You know, you would want to tell them places to avoid and places not to go, because just giving to their own, just let them come and figure things out on their own could really be bad. So God has given these Israelites a warning, a repeated warning, that they need to follow his commandments and do the things the way he wants it done if they're going to be successful in this land. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. Get time. I'll dismiss us with a prayer.